Southeast Queensland is now preparing for the future with new roads and public transport upgrades to improve congestion and livability. I'm speaking with Donald Piggott-McKellar in this episode of Ready STEM Go, discussing his contribution in creating effective infrastructure for tomorrow. Welcome, Don.
Thanks very much. Nice to meet you, Mackenzie.
Yeah, thanks for joining us on the show. So Don is a civil engineer with over 10 years industry experience in the development, planning, design, construction, and project management of major urban projects in London and right here in Brisbane. In 2019, Don was contracted into the rail planning team within the Queensland Government Department of Transport and Main Roads, providing advisory services for the strategic planning of rail projects throughout Southeast Queensland, and aimed at future-proofing rail for the region and getting more commuters on public transport. Recently, Don has joined the team at Forge Advisory as a project manager. So before we jump into all that and discussing what you've contributed to in the face of Brisbane, have you brought with you an epic, inspiring, or crazy STEM story to start off the show?
Yeah, I do have an interesting story, and it's got a bit of a flavour of a lot of projects I've worked on in Brisbane, but it also shows a real intent to change the way that people are moving around Brisbane and make some bold decisions that aren't always going to be popular, which is not an easy thing to do, and something that will become very obvious to people once they're out in the workforce. You can't always keep everyone happy. And that is closing the Victoria Bridge to cars.
Yes.
People may have seen this in the media. It's been a pretty hot topic over the last 2 weeks. And to be fair, ever since they started consulting on the Metro project here in Brisbane. Making such a bold decision that has quite significant impacts to, in particular, car users, personal vehicle users in Brisbane is it's a pretty gutsy thing to do, actually, and I think it shows a real intent and the direction that Brisbane as a city is going, with a priority towards public transport. Obviously, buses can still drive across there, people can still ride bikes across there. They're going to improve it for cyclists, and pedestrians can still walk across the bridge. But being one of the most central kind of avenues and corridors in the city, removing vehicles is something that I think, I don't know, even at the start of my career, those kind of conversations would have been laughed at, and those ideas. So yeah, I think that's really quite bold and a great sign of things to come for Brisbane as a city. And if anything, I hope we see more decisions like that follow, because things like this seem to have a tendency to pick up momentum and be used as precedents if they're a success, and fingers crossed this one is. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's like making a bold move means maybe some smaller decisions can be pushed through a bit quicker.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So yeah, jumping in, aside from a stint in London, you've based yourself predominantly in Brisbane. What have you seen change in Brisbane throughout your time here?
Yeah, there's been a lot that's changed and a lot that hasn't, actually, here in good old Brisbane. So I moved to Brisbane roughly 15 years ago, a little bit more now, actually. And a few of the really positive changes that I've seen is the coming of age of Brisbane, which a lot of people talk about. There's a lot more places to get good coffee, a lot more places to get good food, which is obviously a good thing, and works to attract and keep people here. So yeah, that growing up in a metropolitan sort of sense. The focus and usability of our one of our greatest assets, our river. Bikeways built along the river, roads built so that they showcase the river. A lot of new pontoons and wharf structures built so people can use personal craft and run businesses that can take people directly out to Moreton Island and the like. So there's been a big shift towards focusing and using the river. Shift towards active transport. I'm an avid cyclist myself and have helped build lots of bikeways around Brisbane, and local and state government have put money where their mouth is and spent hundreds of millions of dollars on bikeways since I first moved to Brisbane, and there's definitely a lot more people out there riding bikes, which is a good thing for congestion, the environment, people's health, all that sort of stuff in a subtropical city like the one we are lucky enough to live in. And two other ones that are intertwined is the investment in rail infrastructure and the development of these outer centres, such as North Lakes and Springfield, in the outer regions of Greater Brisbane. North Lakes obviously being within the Moreton local government area, and Springfield within the Ipswich local government area. Rail infrastructure has helped enable those cities, which essentially is what they are, these growing city centres that are kind of decentralised from the standard CBD model that Brisbane has had for a long time. So that model really coming to fruition and being successful is another really big change within Southeast Queensland. And yeah, it's pretty impressive, and a good model that can help people live in a bit closer to where they work and where they play sport and where their kids go to school, and they're not sitting in traffic for longer, and the benefits kind of roll on. So yeah.
Wow, that's a pretty long list of things that have changed. Is there anything in there that you can pick out and say that you've had a hand in the shifting face of Brisbane?
Yeah, certainly the cycle infrastructure around Brisbane. I've worked for Brisbane City Council, which is Australia's largest local council by population and budget. And it's great to be able to ride my bike to work or to my friend's place or out just for leisure and be able to say I played a role in building some of those great bikeways along the river in the suburbs, improved cycle infrastructure through parks at intersections to make it safer for people. So that's probably one of the ones that I'm most proud of, mostly because I am a user of them myself. And my wife gets a bit annoyed with me every time we drive past or ride past something and I pointed out, I played a role in that. The eyes roll, but
it's essential anytime you go past something.
Absolutely.
What's your fave spot to cycle in Brisbane?
I think like the Bicentennial Bikeway, it's a world-class piece of infrastructure, and you don't get the sense that the road's right there because you're separated from it. You're right on the river. Yeah, I mean, it's a spectacular piece of infrastructure, and it's fun to ride on, and there's always people out and about, so it's always got a good vibe. So yeah, it's probably my favourite.
You mentioned that you're involved with the Brisbane City Council, but you've also been part of like different consultancies that are obviously considerably smaller in size. What would you say some of the differences are between jumping between those two positions?
Yeah, that's an interesting one to think about, actually. Because there are a lot of differences and a lot of similarities depending on which government organisation it is or which private company it is as well. I think people would be surprised at how many similarities there are, actually. But probably one of the stark differences is the pace at which decision making happens. And it's inherent with government organisations because they're directly spending people's money, whether it's rates or taxes. And essentially it needs to be that way in the world that we live in, where there's a lot of checks and balances that are made before money is spent and big decisions are made. But with private industry, quite often there's a real sense of urgency to keep up with the times and get ahead of the market and make good ideas happen quickly before someone else makes that idea happen. So quite often the speed at which decisions are made and the sense of urgency is it's always a bit more fast paced.
Yeah, and so you're at the Forge Advisory. That's a consultancy, yeah?
It is, yeah. So we're a small consultancy, and being a small company, there's even more of a sense of urgency to make things happen quickly. And it's also easier to do that because the guy that runs the business, who I know quite well, is a phone call away, and we're able to have very open and honest and frank conversations about decisions that need to be made very quickly. And for me, that was one of the big attractive things about going to a small company is they're very fast moving. you know the people that run the business. You know, you get a feel for exactly what you're contributing towards. Yeah, you're able to actually help shape those businesses and make really big contributions. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's good to hear that you get to, I guess, have that more tangible involvement, would you say, in that smaller team?
Absolutely. Government organisations, as we were saying, are very layered. So quite often there are lots of layers because there need to be those checks and balances. It's just inherent in the structure. So yeah, you can be quite far from the decision making at the top. Big multinational companies, if the head office is overseas, a lot of decisions will get made here in Australia, but to have the final approval has to get sent overseas, and quite often you're not part of those conversations. So absolutely, small company, you get to be part of those conversations. You get to be the one making the recommendations, and it's certainly much more tangible when you're that involved. So sure.
No, awesome. And now let's have a go at peering through a crystal ball. What do you see for the future of Brisbane, say in the next 5 years?
Yeah, well, had you asked me this over 12 months ago, the answer would probably be different with all of this COVID stuff going on, which really has shaken the way people live their lives to a crazy degree. And it's made it a bit harder to predict what the future holds for Brisbane. There are some big projects happening at the moment, which will get completed in the next 5 years. Cross River Rail, Brisbane Metro, and two of the big ones. And there's some massive developments happening, Queen's Wharf and Eagle Street Pier and the like. So at face value, there's going to be lots of brand new infrastructure that's going to have all of the latest tech and all of the latest designs that's going to make Brisbane look like a very smart modern city. So that's going to be a very noticeable change. The whole commute to work model, that's got the potential to change significantly, I think. And there will still be a very key role that the CBD will play for Brisbane. But whether there'll be the same congestion on roads and on public transport as there was, I'm not so sure. I think it will still be busy. And one of the things that may actually happen in the next 5 years is a big population surge here in Brisbane. When you think about Sydney and Melbourne, they've actually fared a little bit worse with us through this whole COVID experience. And I think the more laid back, smaller city feel will become a really high priority for people and be quite desirable. So a population spike on the back of COVID from our southern brothers and sisters could definitely be something on the cards for Brisbane.
Yeah, everyone's excited to come out and test the Brisbane way of life.
Yeah, absolutely. And so they should. I mean, there's nowhere else I'd rather live in Australia, that's for sure.
Yeah, beautiful. And how are you setting yourself up for, I guess, a little bit more of an uncertain future, but still a future here in Brisbane?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, my foreseeable future's here in Brisbane. I love the city. It's always been good to me. And my wife and I have just had our first baby. So
congratulations.
Thanks very much. Very tough and very rewarding, as I'm sure all parents will tell you. But a lot of my future is focused on letting her enjoy Brisbane, really. It's funny how your mindset shifts when things like this happen. So, I mean, that's a lot of my focus for the future. Professionally, we live and work in a little bit of a different world now. There's a lot of video conferences and remote working going on. So working on techniques that allow you to stay focused and actually do some work when you're at home or traveling or working remotely, and harnessing technology to make that happen. You've just got to try new tools, and you've got to be very open-minded to the changes that are happening, and just kind of realize that everyone else is doing it, and try to make the most of it. And obviously that will set you up to be a better employee and a better worker and make more of a contribution going into the future. So that's probably a big one at the moment.
Yeah, adapting virtually.
Yeah, I know it's challenging though. some days, I mean, at first when I started working from home, it was hard to stay motivated all day and to really be productive all the time. And yeah, you got it. It's a totally different routine. And I'm sure studying, like all the students watching this would have had to experience the same thing. So good on you for getting through it, because it's definitely something that no one in our recent times have had to deal with, and we're lucky we've got the technology to make it happen, I guess.
Certainly, yeah, trying to find your footing in like a bit of a shifting way, but yeah, lucky that we had, I guess, the technology infrastructure that this kind of situation actually progressed, like the ability to be able to study online and connect so much virtually in like work environments and work from home. So yeah, it's definitely been interesting to see.
Yeah, do interviews like this.
Yes, Zoom, woohoo. So someone's just about to graduate civil engineering, they're about to step into the workforce of Brisbane. What's some advice that you might be able to give to them?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think this advice probably is relevant to civil engineering students and other. Building your networks as much as you can. And I'm not talking about becoming best mates with the people you go to university with. Not all relationships that you're going to have with people in the real world are all about being mates. There are professional relationships, and building those networks will definitely pay dividends for yourselves in your professional careers in the future. Things such as going along to advocacy groups, Engineers Australia events, introducing yourself to people at conferences, within your own class, those sorts of things. And if you've got more networks, you're going to have more opportunities that present themselves over time. So be open-minded to going to new events, build up the courage to introduce yourself to people. It's one of the hardest things you can do at new events when you're meeting new people, is to actually just go and introduce yourself to people. I still find it challenging, and I've been doing it for quite a while now, but it certainly pays off. The only way to build the confidence and to get some momentum up with that stuff is just to practice. Just give it a go.
Yeah. And there you go. Well, that's nearly all we have time for today. But before I let you go, knowing, yes, in the position that you are now, what's perhaps something that you would go back and tell your younger self?
Find a boss that respects you. So if you find someone that respects you and is willing to give you a chance and challenge you, I'm not talking about a boss that is your best mate either. Someone that is willing to challenge you and to push you and give you constructive feedback and actually trust you and listen to your ideas, you've found somewhere worth working for and with. And I think a lot of that is hinged on respect. So I would tell myself to really really get stuck in and have a proper go at a job where you've got a boss that respects you, and actually search for that as you're going and looking for jobs, and more opportunities present themselves. I think that should be a real priority. And this is a common theme, and I'm sure lots of you have heard this all the time, but it's worth repeating, is find it in yourself to not be afraid of failing when you come up with an idea, and to continually push the boundaries and have a go at things that you think are a good idea. They're not always going to work, sure, but the only way that you're going to learn, in my opinion, is just to keep having a crack at new things, and they're not always going to work out. And especially when you're starting out, quite often they won't. But I would tell myself to back yourself, and find the time to have a go at new ideas, and whether they fail or not, just move on and have a go at something else if it doesn't work out.
Thank you for that insightful advice. I'm sure will be a really good take home for a lot of our listeners. And so that's all for this episode of Ready STEM Go. Thanks for listening, and another big thank you to Donald Piggott-McKellar for joining us today.
No worries. Thanks very much for letting me get involved.
Awesome. And to our listeners, make sure that you subscribe to our channel and to never miss an upcoming episode. Join us on our Facebook page. QUT STEM is for me, to keep up to date with events and resources that you can access.